So for 20 years, we've been trying to create churches unchurched people love to attend and great worship gatherings and great music and all this stuff. But there are a few things that are absolutely the same and have been the same, and hopefully by God's grace will always be the same for 20 years. And that even though we're bigger, we are still committed to creating environments where people can begin to connect, can grow in their faith, and can get to know each other. From the very beginning, we wanted to be an entry point church for seekers and starters, and we wanted to be a returning point or a place where people could re-engage, who were re-engaging with faith and who could come back. And from the very beginning, we didn't simply want to be a big church, although we became a bunch of churches and a big church. From the very beginning, we simply wanted to build a community of Jesus followers who were in community with one another. A community of Jesus followers who were in community with one another. And if you've been at one of our churches for very long, when we talk about being a Jesus follower, we're not talking about necessarily being a sold out Christian, believe Genesis to Revelation and the maps and all the stuff. A Jesus follower is anyone who's willing to take the teachings of Jesus seriously and simply take a step. So we wanted everybody from the people who are skeptical but are, beginning to read their Bibles, all the way up to people like me who were basically born in the church. My dad's a pastor, his grandfather was a pastor. So, and everybody in between, we wanted to create a community of Jesus followers who had all different levels of faith, all different levels of spiritual maturity, who were actually in community with one another. And that's why from the very beginning, we have said, and you've heard us say over and over and over, that circles are better than rows. In fact, we believe this so deeply, I want everybody at all of our churches to say this out loud together. Ready? Circles are, they really are. Now today you're in rows, and I like rows because I make a living talking to people in rows, and we take the offering in rows. So, we're not against rows, but here's what we learned a long time ago. Something can happen in a circle that can't happen in a row. There's accountability. Somebody knows that you're there, you're not there. Somebody comes after you when you begin to drift. A sense of belonging. This is where I belong. This is where people, as you've heard, know my name. There's a sense of care. The primary way that people are cared for in our big growing churches is not through rows, it's through circles. Circles is where we open God's word together and ask the tough questions. Circles is where you say, I'm not sure I buy it. Circles is where you say, does anybody have any idea what Andy was talking about? Circles is where we open God's word together and say, wow, I've never heard it that way before, never read it that way before. Circles is where we pray for one another. Now, every once in a while, I meet somebody who says, Andy, I went to your church last week, or I visited one of your churches a couple weeks ago, and I'm always gracious, but here's what I always think. I think, no, you didn't visit our church. You visited a worship service. You didn't visit our church because our church didn't happen in rows. In fact, our church doesn't really happen. Church doesn't really happen on Sunday morning. Church happens down the hallways and up street where kids are gathered right now with an adult leader learning about Jesus. Church happens in transit, in circles, in small groups with middle schoolers who are sitting down with an adult, two adults, and understanding what it means to be a middle schooler and follow Jesus. Church happens on Sunday afternoons at 4:30 at all of our churches, where our high school students gather together and worship, but then break up into small groups and ask the tough questions as it relates to the teaching. And church happens in your homes, and church happens in my home. If we lost all of our facilities, if we lost all of our buildings, it would not impact the church. Because the church is one anothering one another. The church is loving one another. The church is growing together, and we want you to grow in a way that never, and cannot happen in rows, can only happen in circles. Now, while I'm on this, I just want to say one thing to parents real quick. Okay, so parents, look up here a second. Enroll your kids. Get your kids in one of our small groups, and then do your best to have them here every single Sunday, okay? Because here's the thing. We want to partner with you in the most difficult thing that you'll ever do, and that is raising another human being. Okay, remember when you named your kids? It's like, oh my gosh, what if I give them the wrong name? Okay, that was the easy part, right? Everything after that got harder. You are raising a human being, and we want to help you raise your human being and instill in them a faith that's an anchor that gets set so deep that when they hit middle school and they hit high school, they just won't be able to go too far. Where else in your community is there a group of people who says, let us partner with you as you raise your kids and help your kids navigate the difficulties? We want to do that, and here's the cool thing. We do it for free. We don't even take any of your tax dollars, okay? We do it absolutely free, but it's not free. And the reason we're able to do it is because so many of you understand that what we're doing is so incredibly important, and you give week after week after week. So parents, get your kids in a small group. And here's the thing, then I gotta move on. The earlier the better. The earlier the better. One of the hard things is when somebody shows up with their 16-year-old son or 16-year-old daughter and says, hey, I hear you have a good youth group. Can I put my kid in? We're like, absolutely you can. But it would have worked a lot better if you'd shown up when he was 6 or she was 7 rather than 16 and 17. So get your kids in a group because circles are better than rows. And as much as I'd love to have all of our teenagers and middle schoolers in here listening to me preach, they are better off in transit and they are better off in inside out. And then one more thing I want to say to parents, okay? And you may think this is funny, but I absolutely mean this with all my heart. And this is for all of you who are watching online, those of you who go to our church, those of you who don't go to our church, okay? Please don't take your kids to a church that teaches them to hate church, okay? Don't take your kids to a church that teaches them to hate church. Even if all your friends go there, even if it's the church you grew up in, even if it's the denomination you grew up in, even if it's the church that's closest to your house and you love the preacher, don't take your kids to a church that teaches them to hate church, because when they are older, they will apply what your church taught them. And if you are an adult and you grew up in a church that taught you to hate church, guess what you get to do? You could partner with us and volunteer here while we teach a new generation of children and middle schoolers and high schoolers that the church is the hope of the world. And if you grew up and had a tough time because you got bumped out of church or drifted out of church, come help us create a new mindset for students and high school students who are learning that Jesus really is their Savior and that church represents and is his body. And it's something to look forward to, not something to resist every single Sunday morning. Because the circles are better than rows, and what happens in a circle happens in a way, and what happens in a circle really can't happen any other way. Now, here's the thing, we gotta move on. But circles aren't just a kid thing, and circles aren't just a children thing. Circles are an everybody thing. Circles are an adult thing. Circles are for Christians. Circles are even for non-Christians. Circles are even for skeptical people. Because something that you have experienced as an adult, that we've all experienced as an adult, is reflected in something that Solomon, who wrote a couple of books in the Old Testament, he wrote some things and it was gathered by Jewish people and included in the Old Testament, in the Jewish scriptures. He wrote in the book of Ecclesiastes something that when I read it to you, you're gonna go, oh yeah, I get that. It's a little bit of common sense, but it's the kind of common sense that isn't all that common sometimes because we get so busy. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, he makes an observation about relationship that goes right to the heart of the issue when we think about the importance of being in a small group. And the reason some of you are not in a group is we all have the same reasons. We're too busy. My wife and I's schedule doesn't match up. Our kids are at a certain age, we're carrying them all over the place. We totally get that. We understand that. Everybody you ever meet in group will be as busy as you are, or perhaps even busier. But the people who understand the importance of groups, and those of us who have made circles a priority in our lives, understand the importance and the truth of what Solomon wrote when he wrote these words. This is in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Here's what he said. 2 are better than 1. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. That means when you wash your car, get someone to help you. That's basically what he's talking about. Then he goes on and he kind of gets to the tension around this idea. He says this, if either of them falls down, one can help the other up. He says 2 are better than 1 because if one falls down or they both fall down, they can help each other up or one can help the other up. But, and this takes us to the reason that this is so important for all of us. And again, this is in the Old Testament. This isn't a Christian thing. This is just a thing. This is just a human nature thing. But pity, he says, pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. So let me ask you a question. You ever seen someone fall financially who didn't have anyone to help them up? Have you ever seen a couple fall in their marriage and there was nobody but family to help them up? You ever seen someone who had a serious illness in their family or a serious illness between a husband and wife or one of their kids, and there really was no one there to help them up other than family? Have you ever seen somebody fall morally and a husband's pleading for help or a wife's pleading for help and there's no one there other than family to help them up? Here's the question. If you were to face a situation like that, who Who feels permission or who feels free to ask, are you okay? And won't accept I'm fine as an answer? Who in your life, or really more importantly, is there a group of people in your life right now that if they were to ask you, are you okay, won't accept I'm fine as an answer because they know there's something going on? Is there a group of people in your life that if you were to fall in your marriage, financially, something with one of your kids, is already in place to help you back up? Because Solomon says, pity the individual who falls, no fault of their own, but something goes wrong in life, they fall and there's no one there to help them up. He says, pity the one who falls and has no one to help them up. And then he continues, he says this is so powerful, though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. Now he kind of changes the imagery. He goes from somebody who just falls down to someone who's overpowered. In our culture, this word overpower, we could put in a different word. It starts with over. Over, anybody want to guess? Overwhelmed. I heard somebody say that's right. He says, though one may be overwhelmed, two can defend themselves. At some point in your life, at some point in my life, because of a season in life, because of something that we don't anticipate, we will feel overwhelmed. And Solomon says, when you feel overwhelmed, you will respond to the overwhelming circumstances of life better if there is someone there to walk with you through those circumstances. Now, you didn't need me to tell you that. You already knew that. But at some point, we're all gonna feel overwhelmed. And then he says something that brings some really powerful imagery. He continues and he says this, though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. And then he makes a statement that perhaps you've heard before. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. Now here's the thing. Sandra and I have been in many, many community groups, many, many small groups. In fact, we started a small group before we started the church. We've always been in a small group, and here's something I've observed. I've been in community groups with plenty of broken-hearted people. In fact, in every community group I've ever been in, there are people who have broken hearts. But I've never met anyone in community whose broken heart left them broken. I've never met anyone who is really in authentic community whose broken heart resulted in them being broken down. And what Solomon alludes to is simply this. At some point in our lives, we all need some somebodies. And what we've observed in our lives is that at some point along the way, we all need some somebodies because of decisions we've made, because of decisions other people have made, and because of things that just happen in life. And he says, I pity, and I think all of us have been there, I pity the person who, when they fall, there's no one there to help them up. So consequently, this isn't just something we do as a church program. We really do believe that circles are better than rows, and circles are better than rows for each one of us as individuals. But here's the cool thing. Circles, I think this is even better. Circles have the potential to keep you from falling or keep you from being overpowered in the first place. That being in a circle has the potential to keep you from falling or being overpowered or being overwhelmed in the first place. For this reason, we say that circles or group life is actually preventative. In other words, somebody can see what you can't see. Somebody can see what you can't see. Or to put it another way, somebody can see it coming, right? You say, what's it? That's the point, you can't see it, right? Now, how many times, don't raise your hand and don't nudge anybody and don't whisper, but how many times have you been with a family and you've got a little bit older kids and they got younger kids and you see how they're treating their younger kids or how they're disciplining their younger kids or how they're not disciplining their younger kids and you can see it coming, right? How many times have you been with a couple and you listen to the way he talks to his wife, you listen to the way he talks to his wife, you listen to the way he talks to his wife, and you think to yourself, I can see it coming, but he can't? Or you listen to the way a woman talks about her husband, she's dismissive of her husband, and you as a couple say, you can see it coming, but she can't see it coming. Every single one of us have been with people and we look into their lives and we're not magicians. It's not like we know the future. We don't have a crystal ball, but it's so easy to see what's about to happen or what's coming in other people's lives that they can't see. In the same way, there are people who can look at you and your marriage, the way you're raising your kids, the way you're behaving as a single, and they can see it coming. And the great thing about circles, the great thing about group life is it's actually preventative. Somebody can see it coming and they get to point it out, and it's not fun. And it's not something you want to sign up for unnecessarily, but it's critical to maturity, and really it's critical to our success, and specifically it's critical to our success relationally. And one of the great things about group life, if there's something coming, you are in an environment where a group of people who love you and care about you will find over time the permission to say to you, hey, this is awkward, but I just need to tell you about something I see in your life. I can see it coming. Now, let me just say something to all of our singles, okay? We have lots and lots of singles, college students, professionals, millennials. I mean, singles, we love having singles in our church. And this may be offensive, but just trust me because I'm a little further down the road, okay? There are things in your life as a single that you will never deal with until you are married. Some of those things are the things that are keeping you from getting married. You do not know what they are, or you would have already dealt with them. But when you're single, the great thing about being single is you can do whatever you want. You don't like that roommate, you get a new roommate. You don't like that job, you change jobs. You don't like the city, you change cities. So one of the great things about being a single is you have more freedom. The problem with more freedom is nothing forces you to deal with you. So here's what happens, and every married person can tell you this. In fact, I don't want all the married people to say amen or yeah or moo or whatever you do, or like, yeah, teach them, okay? But I'm just telling you, singles, look at me, I'm your friend, okay? I'm telling you, here's the thing. There's really no such thing as a married problem. Marriage problems are easy. What wrecks marriages is single people with problems who get married, and they bring their single problems into the relationship. In most cases, the thing that you're carrying as a single, somebody can see it. You're the only one who can't see it. You need to be in an environment where somebody can say, let me tell you what I see coming. You need a circle. For example, single guys. Here's something perhaps somebody needs to point out. Have you ever seen one of these? Yeah, you have perpetual bad breath. This is why you can't get a date. Who's gonna tell you that? You don't live with your mom or your dad anymore, right? Okay, single ladies. I know better than to point out anything specific, okay? But no pictures for you. My point is this, because I just want to get your attention. Here's the thing. Being in a small group as a single man or a single woman is one of the most powerful things you can do to prepare you for your relational future, whether you get married or not, because here's what we've discovered, all of us married people. People with issues get married, and when you're single, there is no one who can force you to deal with the thing that may be an obstacle later on. But if you're in a good small group, somebody can see it coming. And in a good small group, somebody's gonna say something. And it may not just, it may not be a physical thing, may not be a relational thing. It very well be a spiritual thing, because your faith is small and you've yet to learn how to bring the issues of faith into all of life. We don't want you to miss this unique opportunity. In fact, I would guess, and we're not gonna raise hands, I would guess that just about every single married person in all of our churches would love to have the opportunity to go back and to be in a strong singles small group that could help them deal with some of their stuff to prepare them for marriage down the road. But we don't have that opportunity. But here's the thing, singles, you get to get it right the first time. College students, you get to get it right the first time. You'll never have this opportunity again. Just don't miss it, and let us help you by getting in a small group, okay? Okay, if you're married and you think that what I said is at least 80% true, would you just say something or make a noise or raise your hand? Okay, there you go. We're for you. Now, married people, here's the thing. All of us in our marriage, there are things in our marriage other people can see that we can't see. Worse, husbands, there are things your wife can see and you can't hear her. And ladies, there are things your husband can see and he's like, no way, just no way. I brought that up once, let's go to a small group, okay, we just all need it. And we don't just need it as individuals, we need it as couples. Here's the thing, every marriage, I've been doing this a long time, every marriage needs some support now to avoid the need for life support later. Every marriage needs some support right now to avoid life support later. This is why I say group life is preventative. Group life is preventative. Community is preventative. There are things you will never have to face. There are things you may never have to feel. There are problems that you'll be better equipped to deal with if you are in a circle of people who are opening God's word together, taking some of the big concepts we talk about in church and talk about how they apply at work, how they apply in your particular marriage, how they apply in this season of your life as you're parenting, how they apply as someone who's dating and trying to navigate the morality of a culture that doesn't seem to have much morality. There are things that can happen in circles that just can't happen any other way, and they are preventative. Now, the problem with preventative is you don't know what you've prevented, right? I mean, how many car accidents have you not had because you're a good driver? You have no idea. Now, here's something to think about. This is so cool to me. In our Atlanta area churches, we have about 5,000, now think about this. We have about 5,000 middle school kids and high school kids combined. About 5,000 middle school and high school kids combined that are actually in small groups led by adults. In fact, many of their small group leaders are sitting in our churches today. About 5,000, think about that, 5,000 high school, middle school school kids who are actually meeting almost every single week in a small group. Now here's the question. I know there's no answer. I just want you to think about the significance of this. Do you know how many kids won't drop out of school because of the influence of their small group leader? Do you know how many of those middle school and high school kids will not drink and drive because of the influence of a small group leader? Do you know how many of those kids won't have to, have a stint in rehab because of the influence of a small group leader? Do you know how many of those kids will never mess around with illegal drugs because of the influence of a small group leader? Do you know how many of those young ladies will never have to wrestle with an unwanted pregnancy because of the influence of a small group leader? And the answer is we have no idea. But if you think about the significance of having someone partnering with parents and pouring into middle school and high school students, the numbers are probably staggering. And you can see that small group circles are absolutely preventative. And the same is true for all of us in adult world as well. But here's the tricky part. Group life is a bit like retirement savings. If you wait, you won't have it when you need it. If you wait, it won't be there when you need it. The most difficult calls that we get as a group of churches, by far the most difficult calls, are when there's a tragedy in someone's marriage or family, or there's a physical illness, or a kid kind of spins off into prodigal world, and parents call us, or families call us, or a husband calls us, or wife calls us, and they say, can the church help? Can the church help? Can the church help? And the first question we ask is, are you in a group? Is he in a group? Is she in a group? And 90% of the time, the answer is no. Because otherwise they wouldn't be calling the church. Because the church is not the receptionist in the front office. And we absolutely welcome all of those calls. But here's the problem. The church can express concern and compassion immediately. But what you need in those moments is community, not simply concern and compassion. You need community, and community takes time. That's why it's like retirement savings. When you need it, if you haven't developed it all along the way, it won't be there for you. So we want every single one of you to have a group of people so that if and when you fall, there will be someone to pick you up. And if and when you find yourself overwhelmed with life, there will be somebody to walk with you through those times. Now, this is super personal for me and for Sandra. And the reason is, actually it was this week, 20 years ago, this week, exactly 20 years. In fact, we just celebrated our 27th and wedding anniversary on the 6th, this Thursday. Thank you, golf clap, yep. 27 years. But when we were married 7 years, I left my previous employer and went for about 2.5, 3 months in a free fall in lots of different ways. Sandra was pregnant with Allie. We lost our insurance. That was a surprise. There was a whole lot going on. It was the most difficult time in our marriage, the most difficult time for us financially, the most difficult time professionally, relationally, emotionally. I was going to a counselor. There were days I would be talking to Sandra and she would just pat me on the shoulder and say, you need to go talk to Steve. That was my counselor. You need to go see Steve. It's like, can't help you with that, okay? Oh, you're telling me the same story over and over and over, like I'm gonna, I don't know anything more than I did yesterday. So really, really difficult time. And we would tell you, do you know what got us through? Our community group. We'd been with the same couples for about a year, just under a year, when we hit the most difficult time of our lives 20 years ago this week. And those couples are still in our church, and they've been in groups through all these years just like we have. But I'm telling you, week after week, we would meet and they would just let me talk. And they'd just pray for me. Then they let Sandra talk, and they'd pray for her. And then after I talked, they'd pray for her some more. They'd say, Andy, can you step out of the room? We really need to lay hands on Sandra and pray for Sandra, okay? I mean, it was so difficult, and I was so angry. And, the future, she's pregnant, and how, all that kind of stuff. I'm telling you, our community group got us through. And here's the reason I'm bringing it up. They were already there, so they were already there for us. They were already there, so they were already there for us. If they had not already been there, they would have not already been there for us. This is why it's like retirement savings. It better be there when you need it, and you never know when you're gonna need it. And I'm telling you, we have a great church. We will be there for you, but we will not know you. And we will show up at the hospital, but we'll have to make sure we got the name straight before we walk in the door. And we'll bring food to your home, but we'll have to search for your home because we don't know where you live. And that we'll do our very best to be the church for you. But we will never on our very best day be as good as the circle that you have the opportunity to get involved with. People who know your name, know your kids' names, know where you went to college, know where your parents live, know what you're dealing with, and who can show up as a friend and be the hands and feet of Jesus. The church, the office church, the pastor church, we will never be that good. We were never intended to be that good because we have the opportunity to be in circles because circles are always better than rows. So this is a big deal. And here's the thing, and I said this. I love rows. I make a living talking to rows. But I want you to be in a circle so that if you fall, there will be someone to pick you up. And better yet, perhaps you won't have to fall because somebody will see it coming and point it out. Now, if my story isn't convincing, if the stories that you've already heard today aren't convincing, the stories that some of you are going to hear next week aren't convincing, just think about your story for a minute. Think about the difference it might have made in your growing up years. If your father had been in a men's group with a bunch of men who could see it coming and pointed it out before it blew up your family. Think about how different your life might have been growing up. If your parents had been in a small group, and when they hit that bump that ultimately drove them apart, there had been a group of people. In other words, they weren't just going to church because so many of your parents who, their marriages ended in divorce, many of them went to church. They sat in rows, sang the songs, put a few dollars in the plate, maybe even sang in the choir. But imagine if they had been an actual, authentic community. And when your mom kind of started spinning out in her deal or your dad started spinning out in his deal, a group of men or a group of women said, no, we're not going to let you go. You're not getting away that easy. We will not let you fall and stay down. You may be overwhelmed, but we're there for you. You may be broken on the inside, but we're not going to leave you on the side of the road. Imagine how different your life now would be if your parents had experienced the kind of community we're talking about. If you're married and have kids, or if you ever hope to be married, and if you ever hope to have kids, why wouldn't you give that gift to your next generation? What a difference it may have made in your life right now. Again, circles are better than rows. Circles are better than rows.